Welcome to the Space Marketing Podcast, where we look at marketing principles, strategies, and tactics through the lens of space. Hi, I am your host, Izzy House, and this year we are meeting space industry professionals and discussing how marketing strategies can help your company grow. On this episode, we will discuss the importance of creating a marketing plan. Our guest today is from Down Under, Amanda Hudswell from Equatorial Launch Australia. So lift off in 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Space Marketing Podcast. Information relating to our discussion today and links to the video version can be found in the episode show notes on spacemarketingpodcast.com. Please like and subscribe to the podcast. It will help more people reach beyond the atmosphere. Information in this episode is for entertainment and information only. Please consult a professional for your specific situation. So, in today's episode, we will be discussing the importance of a plan. A marketing plan provides a blueprint for your communication activities. A plan maximizes your effort by targeting the right people in your important audiences. And it determines the marketing activities that will most resonate with them. A plan transforms dreams into reality by establishing the steps necessary to take an idea to fruition. And finally, a plan provides clarity of action for the entire team. Everyone knows what they're supposed to do. In both my books, Space Marketing and Space Marketing Spaceports, I stress the importance of having a marketing plan. And I provide some tips to make that a little bit easier. Anyone who has been a listener to the podcast for a while knows that I have a soft spot for spaceports. I mean, I wrote a book that has spaceports in the title. And several months ago, a spaceport in Australia, the Equatorial Launch Australia, or ELA, hired a new marketing person, and I just had to meet her and let you meet her today. So please help me welcome Amanda Hudswell, Head of Marketing Communications and Public Affairs at the Equatorial Launch Australia, or ELA. So welcome to the podcast, Amanda. How are you today?
Hi, Izzy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really well. It's the morning over here. I've just gotten up, so I'm nice and fresh and ready for a chat about marketing and marketing plans.
And I'm in the day before in the evening, so that it just blows my mind.
It does, yeah. We've got a team over in Colorado at the moment at the Space Symposium, and so there's a bit of a juggle with timeframes to connect with them, but we're managing it. The US is a little bit easier than Europe, so it's challenging, but it's great that we're over there traveling and connecting and engaging.
Absolutely. And today, for me, we just finished having the Eclipse, so I got to see the Eclipse. It was 95% for me, for where I live. It was, and the clouds parted just in time to where I had I had a little mirror, and I was looking at the reflection and the reflection. So I was in a double reflection situation with some tinting, and I was able to actually see it. So it was phenomenal. I love that stuff. One of the things I like to start with is a chance to get to meet you and find out, a little bit more about you. So tell us about you and how you became interested in space.
Sure. So I'm head of marketing at Equatorial Launch Australia. I guess my interest in space came. It's probably a similar journey to, I suspect, a lot of people. I've always had that interest in space and always wanted to see the eclipses. And I look up at the night sky and I can tell you that's a planet and that's a star. So there's always been that interest in space. But I guess when I sort of started working, there wasn't a space industry in Australia. There certainly wasn't commercial space industry. So I worked in other sectors, and I guess I started actually working in finance and decided really quickly I didn't want to work in finance. So I went and did a marketing postgrad. I have an undergrad in science, and then wanted to combine those two. So I decided really about 20 years ago to get into space and technology communications and marketing. So I was really keen and excited by the stories that I was hearing coming out of companies and the technology and the space sector and all of that sort of thing. And I really wanted to tell those stories. So I managed to get into that and started working for a research company that was working in wheat and barley research. And I was communicating the techniques that they use, genetic modification and selective breeding and those sorts of things. But then I decided, okay, well, I actually want to go and work with small companies, with startups, because it's so exciting to see somebody start with a really engaging kind of visionary idea and see them on that journey to bring it to fruition. And I wanted to be part of that. So left the research organisation and went and worked for a startup support agency in Adelaide. And we've got actually a really amazing community here and really great state government investment into emerging businesses. So they've, in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, they've invested heavily in startups and specifically in the high-tech sector and specifically in space. So they've really just kind of generated this, I guess, ecosystem of these high-tech companies that are coming up. And it's fantastic to kind of have positioned myself as a space or a tech and high-tech marketer, and then be able to sort of move into the space sector. So after working for that agency, I went and worked in a startup for a while. It was an aviation aerospace startup, so it was kind of heading towards space. And worked there for about 4 years. And then my CEO at the moment, Michael Jones, connected with me last year and said, look, we really need to get somebody in-house, and just wanted to see whether I was interested. And I literally jumped at the idea because, this is it. I was finally working in the space sector. So it's a really an interesting kind of journey there, but I ended up working in where I wanted to, which is the space sector.
Well, and it sounds like you're the perfect person for them. I mean, you have this aviation side, which, that is a big part of a lot of the spaceport arena, as well as the rocketry part. So, I mean, wow, that could not have been better. Australia is one of those countries that are just taking space and just running with it. And, can you tell us a little bit more about ELA, Equatorial Launch Australia, and what it is that you are doing with them?
Yeah, sure. So Equatorial Launch Australia is owner and operator of a spaceport in the Northern Territory. So we're based here in Adelaide. I'm here in Adelaide in South Australia. We're at the bottom of Australia, in the middle. And we identified a spot up in the north of Australia, which was perfect for a spaceport. It's kind of on the eastern edge of one of the sections of Australia that kind of sticks up. So we've got ability to launch over water. It's 12 degrees south of the equator. So it's perfect to be able to provide equatorial orbits. But we can also offer, mid-inclination and SSO and those sorts of orbits as well. So it was just like such a great opportunity to secure this land. And we worked with the traditional owners of the land, the Gumarch Corporation, who are our Indigenous partners in this project. So, and we continue to work closely with them to, I guess, develop the spaceport there. They were really keen to bring space to their region. And so I guess what we do, what's unique about ELA, so the spaceport that we own is called the Arnhem Space Centre. So, and what's unique about our offering is that so Michael Jones, our CEO, has travelled extensively, met with lots of launch companies, lots of payload customers. He's spoken at lots of conferences, and he's really gathered in the last couple of years a really great understanding of what spaceports need to have, and he's led that vision and developed that. So we've developed a couple of things. We've developed a resident launcher business model where it's almost like a bit of an airport for space. We're bringing in launch vehicle companies to take up a designated space on the spaceport. We're calling it a SLIC, or a Space Launch Complex. And in that, they'll get a horizontal integration facility that they get to use, for themselves, and a couple of launch pads. So, and those launch pads we've worked on have got latest tech. So we've, incorporating things like thermal and acoustic protection to minimize pad damage so that we can reuse those pads, therefore, reducing costs and reducing time to get the next launch up. And we're sort of simplifying rocket handling by having this really innovative integration plate between the launch vehicle and the pad to help with just, minimal configuration changes so we can increase the cadence of launch. So there's some really cool tech going on here in the background. We're also offering horizontal integration facilities where there's things like, ISO 8 clean rooms, there's overhead gantries that can carry 20,000 kilos, HVAC, climate control, rocket assembly areas. The buildings themselves are about 40 meters by 26 by about 12 high. So they're huge buildings that companies can just come in, horizontally integrate, vertically integrate in a clean room, and then move it out to the launch pad and launch. And it's their own dedicated facilities. So it's kind of like a really cool offering where we're finding that this is just resonating with our customers when we talk to them about it. And we're really excited. We've already signed Innerspace, which is a South Korean company, launch company, for some launches starting in 2025. And Michael's overseas at the moment. We're expecting to kind of, fill out 7 launch pads or 7 space launch complexes within the next sort of 12 months. They'll be fully booked. So it's a really exciting time for us. And I love the fact that I'm working for a company that's got this vision, that's kind of saying, okay, this is what we need in the world right now, but actually looking 5 to 10 years ahead and saying, yeah, let's set it up so that we're future-proofing this spaceport. It's really exciting.
I saw a picture of your facility. So are they actually built yet, or are they in the process of being built?
Yeah, we're redeveloping it at the moment. So there's one launch pad we actually launched with NASA 3 times in 2022. Which is a pretty cool reference customer to have, they did some suborbital launches with us. And they were the first time NASA had launched commercially outside of the US. And they were Australia's first commercial launches. So it was kind of like really big news for us. There's a pad that's already there from them, and then we're building the rest of them as well. But one of the things we're doing is working with the companies as they start to tell us exactly what they need and what the rocket configuration is and all of that sort of thing. We're working with them to make sure that it's perfectly designed for them.
So what size rockets are you looking at launching? There's the big Atlas, huge rockets, and then there's the smaller ones that can probably have a better cadence. So what size are you looking at?
We're looking for new space rockets that are launching telecommunication satellites or Earth observation and those sorts of things. So it is that smaller end of the small to medium end of the market that we're engaging with.
Which is probably one of the more important. I mean, we talk about crew a lot, but the fact of the matter is that everything we do, including our little conversation here, is all run by satellite. So satellites are so imperative to our daily life. One of the things that when you first started doing this at ELA, is this their first marketing person that they've had on staff?
Yeah, good question, actually. That was something I wanted to talk about today. We've had a digital specialist on staff, so somebody managing social media and that sort of thing. And I think I was brought in to sort of oversee the program itself and build out the media side of it, engagement, community building, that sort of thing. When we had the NASA program, we used an external agency, and they did a fabulous job of what they, the event management side of it, the media engagement. But I guess that kind of brings up this kind of, question that founders, I guess, always have is like, do I outsource my marketing or do I bring somebody in? When's the right time to do that? And I think that was the right move for us at that stage. But of course, the NASA campaign happened. And then life goes on, the world moves on, and we sort of didn't quite leverage that on an ongoing sense. So because it was an agency, and they weren't on a retainer; they were employed to do a specific project. So I guess last year Michael decided, no, I think we need somebody in-house to kind of manage this day-to-day program and kind of build the reputation day on day, so that we're starting to cut through and get some brand awareness overseas, and particularly with our customers. I mean, we had a really great program where he was going out and meeting with them, so sort of like an outbound kind of program. But yeah, that sort of inbound, that storytelling, the media side of it, we sort of needed to kind of ramp up.
Yeah, the planning part, which
Exactly.
I saw him a couple of months ago at the GSA Spaceport Summit, and you can only travel so many places. I mean, it's with where Australia is located, everything is a flight, and
Yes. Yeah.
it's just you can only be so many places at once. So when you have a plan, things can work as a rotation, as and get some momentum, where when you just do a one and done purchase, it's like renting a car. Once you're done, you have no car. When I start a new project, the first thing that I like to do is create a marketing plan. It develops a picture of the who, the what, the why, the where, the when, and the how. It tells a big story about who you're talking to, so that you can really craft those messages that resonate. So, can you tell us why you developed a written plan, and writing it down? How important is that?
It's like any sort of plan. It's like the business plan as well. The company will have a business plan to say, we want to target these customers, we want to generate this amount of sales. So the marketing plan is just an extension of that. And I always say the first thing I do when I walk into a company is, okay, show me your business plan. Because if
Yes.
the marketing plan has to support and assist and help achieve the goals within the business plan, it's no good the marketing plan going, oh, we're going to go and talk to high school students about something. It's when the business is trying to connect with, say, satellite manufacturers in Europe. So you really have to kind of like understand what the business is trying to do at that time, and then bring in that marketing plan to support those activities from an engagement and a communication sense.
Yeah, start off with the who, and the goals that you're going to be doing. If you don't know who you're talking to, then it's just not going to land. It's like throwing a dart at a bullseye, and then ending up all the way down the hall. So
Exactly.
you really need to understand the who. And for creatives, you, for one, I always think of that person in my head whenever I'm working on anything. And so it's critical. That's the first thing that I do, is determine the goals and the who.
I think that's really important, because that's one of the reasons why bringing in somebody with a bit of commercial background and a marketer, that they bring that sense of always thinking about it from the audience's perspective. And they actually, they tend to be across the trends in the sector as well. So they can kind of go, okay, the audience, this particular audience, so knowing your customer personas is really important, identifying who it is you want to speak to. But for this particular audience, that particular issue is really important. And so this is
Yes.
the news that you have. Let's work out how that fits in with the needs and what's going to resonate with that audience. So it is about kind of really tailoring your message and knowing that you have multiple audiences. There might be one audience that you really want to speak with more than others, your primary audience, and that will change over time as your business progresses and as your business plan changes. But yeah, just understanding that you are speaking to potentially a primary or a couple of primary audiences, but you're also speaking to your broader audience set as well.
Hold on to your boosters. We will be right back with guest Amanda Hudswell, Head of Marketing Communications and Public Affairs at Equatorial Launch Australia, after the briefest message from our sponsors. Please like and subscribe to the Space Marketing Podcast so you don't miss a thing. And you're not going to have just one. You're not going to
Exactly.
just have one. For
Exactly.
example, you have your community, which is the Aboriginal people. So they're going to have a completely different set of pain points and concerns and things that are important to them that you need to talk about. That is not going to be the provider, the launch providers, or the companies that are going to be tenants. Or even different, you're going to have the high schools. How are you going to resonate with them so that they choose careers that are in this space industry and not necessarily engineering or STEM, though those are good, but a lot of other different. I mean, we're not STEM particular people. I mean, you do have some S in your background,
Mhm.
but we're marketing professionals, we're business professionals. So, it's not going to be just one message with one group of people. And it's important to make sure that you have several different dynamics going on. For example, if you're a spaceport and you're not paying attention to your surrounding community, it can kill the project. We're having that happen a lot here in the States,
Right. Okay.
where just a small group of people are saying, we don't want it out of our backyard. And
Yeah.
it's determining a lot of things. So it's really
Yeah.
important to craft those messages.
That stakeholder engagement piece is really important. I agree. Yeah. It's also about knowing what channels those audiences are on. So for instance,
Yes.
we post to a Facebook group that's in that area, around the surrounding area of our spaceport, because we know that the locals access that particular Facebook channel, but we know that more than likely the launch companies in Europe or US or wherever are probably looking more at LinkedIn or reading the sort of trade publications or those sorts of things. So it is about understanding your audience, understanding that customer persona, and really knowing where it is that they seek out their information, because that's where you should be.
Exactly. And the message, crafting that story that really resonates with them is critical.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah.
So, other things that a plan may have is it outlines the message and how it feels and what's the flavor to it, but it also determines the strategies and tactics as well as how to measure them. So, do you want to talk about that?
So it's funny because I often use an example here, which people sometimes look at me a bit weirdly when I use this example, but it kind of, I want to make a point, and it's, like if given enough resources, I could develop a device to bounce my logo off the moon, and that would be amazing. Like the whole world would know about it. People would be on social media about it. There'd be traditional media stories about it. But 2 weeks later, would anyone care? Would we have actually achieved the goals that we're trying to achieve? Back to the marketing plan, what is it that we're actually trying to do? Are we trying to increase sales in Europe, or are we trying to, position ourselves in an Asian market or whatever? Would that activity have actually achieved those goals? Yeah, no, probably not. I probably would have been better attending conferences in Asia or Europe, or trying to place media in those areas. So, the tactics are, it's really important to follow the steps of that strategy, to kind of go, okay, what are your aims and objectives? Who is your message? Who's your audience? And then what do you want to say to them? How are you going to speak to them? How are we going to get access to them, which is your strategy? And then what are you actually going to do? That's your tactics. So, it's about following that process so that you can make sure that you're maximizing and optimizing your budgets and your resources, because it's very easy to spend money on things that don't actually generate results.
And I love to be scrappy. A lot of times when you're creating that plan and you're starting to go down those rabbit holes, you come up with other ideas you never even thought of. So actually constructing the plan is just as valuable as the plan itself. And you can see, okay, what if I could do this? And then you ask, well, how can I do that with no budget? Because I don't care what company you are, very few companies actually have budgets to burn. And
Yeah.
so we're all on a budget. So, how can we do the most impact without budget? And sometimes you'll come up with a strategy or a tactic that is completely different than what you thought it would be, but yet it's phenomenal. So, you know, that plan It's
Yeah, I
very
agree.
important. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. It's amazing when you actually follow that process. You do. I absolutely agree with what you said. You do find that you think in a certain way that will lead you down a certain path, and things you might not have just generally jumped to, having gone, oh, let's do some social media, or let's get a media article in that publication. You actually think about, okay, you know what, it might actually be better to do an event in that particular situation, because that's what that would resonate with that particular audience. So yeah, it's I just can't, a marketing plan is so important. It's also a living document, so it will change over
Yes.
time. So something that you need to make sure you're being flexible with, and incorporating changes and testing. So measurement is something that I really wanted to talk about too, where you make sure you're evaluating what you're doing, and checking that the analytics are achieving what you want them to do. Are you actually, and being honest, are you actually achieving what you want to achieve? And if it's not working, that's actually good too, because then okay, let's cut the spend there and direct it to something else, or how can we optimize that or improve it? So there's a number of different things that a strategy will help with.
And one of the interesting things about measurement that it tells you is sometimes it can fib to you too. It can lie to you. It can tell you, oh, this isn't working, but maybe it's the wrong channel. Maybe it's just the wrong time. So it is very difficult sometimes to figure out what works and what doesn't. And sometimes time is the person. But as you're watching, you're able to sit there and manipulate it and tweak it and maybe make it a little bit better because you're concerned with it. So,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
agreed.
sometimes the numbers lie.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the process needs to be that you sort of track it over time, so that you can see the
Yes.
changes. So one of the first things you can do when you walk into an organization as a marketer is set up some sort of thing. Pick three, I guess, analytics or metrics that you want to measure, and then just track those. And you might find that they need to change over time. But things like, what are your engagement rates, and how many, if you're looking at new followers to a channel, like what's your new followers, those sorts of things. What are click-through rates, those sorts of, I guess, little tiny metrics that you can just track. And competitor analysis is another really great thing to track as well. We had a really great result this week. We've been tracking against 10 other companies, competitors, and sort of some key space companies in Australia. I've been tracking them for a couple of months, and we've been ranking about fourth for new followers. And just this week, in the last month, we ranked first. So I was so excited to see. When I opened up the page, I was like, "Oh my god, we just jumped!" And that was on the back of some paid social that we had been doing, and we'd been running it for a couple of months, and it's just starting to show results now. So things do take time, and you do need to give them some time, and let them kind of run and see how they pan out. And, if that, we'll double down on that now. But if it wasn't working, we'd cut it and try something else.
Well, and that's the fun bit, is to actually set everything in motion and watch it work.
Yeah.
It's like,
And to achieve the results is just so rewarding.
yes, it
Yeah,
is. I mean, it's what gives us the juice to just check it one more time to see if we're getting close to that platform, that number. But at the end of the day, the number that really is important is the finance. Is it
exactly.
is it adding to the bottom line? You can do all these fun things and you can do all these metrics, but if it's not bringing in income for the business, it won't last. So, it's
Yeah,
and some of it you cannot actually tie a dollar to it. You can just watch everything grow. But things that don't be things that do not have attention tend to fade away. So we
exactly.
want to make, yeah, so this is a part of
Yeah.
bringing that attention.
And I guess the other thing about, tracking your metrics and how they're performing is that you can then show value of the marketing program to, your C-suite, so that you can go back and say,
Yes.
look, over this amount of time, we've managed to increase X by Y, whatever, and also making sure you keep yourself accountable to that. So, if things aren't working, you can say, look, that isn't working, so we've decided to cut that and we've reinvested over here. So, it does. Marketing is such a hard thing to, being a creative kind of, I guess,
Yes.
aspect of business. it is a really hard thing to point to and go, yes, that's been achieved. So being able to track anything that we can, and social media is such a great, there's so much data there for us to be able to use, but it's harder to kind of track, I guess, a bit of the softer things. Like, so what was the exhibition at a certain conference successful? How do you measure that? Maybe it's foot traffic through the booth, or a number of leads generated or whatever. But there'll definitely be something that you can track to say, yep, you know what, we achieved what we wanted to achieve.
And like social media, if let's go back there, some of what is the important bits of social media is not necessarily immediately apparent. It's like if you are changing the culture around you to be more inclusive of space, then you're not really going to see that initially. But on down the line, those are your pipeline for your future employees. So that's where you're going to start to see them. That's where your new inventors and your new companies that are happening around the area, that's where you see them actually kind of growing as well. So sometimes it's not necessarily the digital part that you're tracking. There's a lot of non-digital stuff that you're tracking as well. So
it's a really good point. Yeah. No, it is. It is. It's what you touched on there about like, for instance, we've considered this where our spaceport is set up. We understand it's actually in a town. It's near a town called Nullarbor. It's about 40 k's away from this town called Nullarbor. Nullarbor was established as a mining town, so it's actually quite big for a remote town. It has B737 capable airport. It's got roll and roll off port access. It's got deep water port. It's just there's lots of infrastructure there that we're able to use as well. But what we've understood, so the mining aspect of that is slowly being removed from the town, and so the town is now looking for alternative industries and to come in, I guess, and sort of keep the town alive. And so we acknowledge that we're not going to be able to fill the entire shoes of the marketing efforts that were there. The mining efforts that were there, but we will definitely be able to add some value to that, and to be able to bring high tech to that area as well is really important. So last year we did a road trip where we did like a business engagement, I guess, initial what would we say, a business engagement roadshow. And we went up there, we met with local businesses, and we talked about what our program was going to be doing. And, just to kind of get them to start thinking, okay, you know what, there is still life here, and there is a way that I can perhaps pivot my business slightly to be able to service the space industry instead of the mining industry. So there's, even that, being able to kind of give that to the community there is a great result for us.
And as a marketing professional, for us to look at that surrounding area and say, okay, what are the key things that makes this area unique? What are the services that they have to offer? And what are some of the things that maybe they are not thinking are space related that can be tweaked to be space related? Like in our particular area, we are surrounded by river that goes right to the Gulf. So we may not be able to launch rockets, but we can build them. And so you look at what those areas have that are strengths, and you're able to utilize those for space, because there are so many different industries that have space components to them that people don't even realize. And our job is to be that megaphone for saying, hey, did you know that space is a part of that?
Yes, telling stories is, I think, one of the challenges of space marketers at the moment is being able to get the audiences that we're trying to speak to, and almost just the general public, to understand that space is part of their lives, and that's what's going to build the advocacy, which is then going to influence government, which is then going to help stimulate policy and investment and those sorts of things. So that's our challenge, I think, at the moment, is to work out how we can actually tell those stories. So.
And connect it to them personally,
exactly.
Because
yep.
I mean, I've had people that said, well, what do we need space for, while they're sitting there holding their cell phone after they've looked up their directions and their weather and all that. And I'm like,
yeah,
it's a part of everything you do. Everything,
yes,
from
yeah.
agriculture to watching the waters, for illegal fishing and in what's the for human trafficking. It's important for all those things. So
It is.
it's
But
part of our story. Yes.
it is. It's hard to. So, for instance, space can help with agriculture. Space can help with mining, but those industries are also struggling to tell their stories. And the relevance to
Yes.
the everyday person as well. So it's not enough for us to just say, "Oh, well, we can help with agriculture or we can help with mining." We actually need to be able to say, "This is how we help you on a day-to-day basis." And things like pharmaceutical manufacturing in space that can perhaps develop drugs that might be able to help with someone who's got cancer, that then brings it in closer to people that go, okay, well, actually that's going to be a really great outcome for me personally because I've been affected by that in my family. So, it's being able to really deep dive into those things. There's a really great book by Donald Miller called Building a Story Brand, which talks
Yes, I
about
love it.
business storytelling. You've read that? Yeah, it's really
Yeah, it's one
great.
of
And I
my
love
favorites.
his idea of, there's a hero who has a problem, who meets a guide, who gives them a plan, who calls them to action. And then I think it's to stop, to avoid failure and achieve success. And it's a 7-point kind of process. And if, when we're storytelling, if we keep things like that, he calls it the SB7 framework. And if we keep things like that in mind, that's how they write movies. That's why movies are successful, because you have that emotive kind of connection with the story. And it's important for us as storytellers for our industries. And I consider myself an executive creator, so someone who can tell business stories, to keep that in mind, because we do need to have that emotive connection, because we're all humans, and that's where we start to kind of build those relationships between individuals and companies.
One of the most important things that I was able to get from that book was that as a marketer, as a company, when you're doing your message, that your audience is the hero, not
Yes,
you.
yes. It's
Yes,
such an
you are the
important.
guide. You are
Yes,
the mentor, and that
yes,
is
exactly.
critical.
It is, because oftentimes you will, it's so different to telling a story to say, say you're a launch vehicle company and you tell a story about a payload customer who might be sending up satellites to help identify and predict bushfires. And you tell that story from that perspective, from the payload customer's perspective. And hey, we're the launch vehicle that got them up to space because they couldn't access space because spaceport congestion at the moment. It's just huge. If there was going to be lots of time before they could actually get up there, perhaps 2 years, but we managed to get them up there because perhaps they came to our spaceport in in the Arnhem Space Center, and they were successful and managed to get those satellites up and start sort of sensing and detecting and those sorts of things. So that's a great story. It's better than saying something like, we're a launch company, come and launch with us,
Aren't we
click here
great?
to book. Yeah, yeah. It's just got so much more to that emotive kind of storytelling than it has to kind of, and it's different. So that might be a case study that you put on your website, something about, as a launch vehicle company, how you've engaged with your payload customers, and here's a case study. But there's also value to, say, media releases, which are, here's the news and here's the the rest of it that you might need to know. So it's, again, using lots of different channels and tactics.
So when we're creating those messages and those stories to connect with the audience, we are the guide, we're the mentor, and the companies that are in search of, they have a problem, they have a villain, which but
Yeah,
they pretty
the
much have
villain. Yeah.
a problem that they're dealing with, that they're looking for a solution to. That's their quest. So when we create a message that resonates with them, we're helping them with their quest so that they can be successful. And
Yeah.
it's not about us. Yes.
I think marketing based around that concept of identifying the customer's problem and then talking about how you solve that problem is just so critical, because that is how you get into people's feeds, and that's just scroll stoppers, so to speak. That's what people go, oh yeah, that's my problem, how do you solve it? Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting. So yeah, it's making sure that it's not about us, it's about the customer and the solution that we're doing or
And
providing.
when they can see themselves in your message, when they sit there and they go, "Oh, that's me.
Yeah, yeah,
Boom,
yeah,
you just resonated. And
yeah.
that is really truly the goal. So what are some marketing challenges that you have encountered with this ELA project, and how have you dealt with them?
Yeah, so
Yes.
some of the marketing challenges, I guess, yeah, we're running we're running a space startup. So a budget is always a big, I guess, challenge for us. Also, obviously, Australia being where it is can be a bit of a challenge to communicate the fact that we're actually an island nation. We're actually really good at getting stuff here. So, logistics of getting to the country, which sometimes people think, hang on a sec, you're really far away. Actually, we're not. We're living in 2024 right now. And as a country, we're so used to bringing things in on ships, by air freight or whatever, that we've solved a lot of that issue. So kind of trying to communicate that to our audiences and our customers has been challenging, and to break down, I guess, stereotypical, I guess, perceptions of where Australia is, and how far it is away. It's not that far anymore. The world is a small place now.
It's getting smaller every day. I
It
mean,
is, yeah.
like I said, just the fact that we're sitting here having a chat. I mean, how small has the world gotten that we can just,
Exactly.
it wasn't that long ago to where this was, number one, a really expensive phone call, number one. And number two, if the other people had a phone. And here we are without even thinking about it, online, just just having a chat, and we're 13 hours apart. So, you
It is.
know,
It's and thank you to space. That's
yes,
that's
thank you to
because we're thank
space.
you to space. Yeah, and then it's part of it's one of those things where when your technology becomes part of the furniture, and people just assume that it's there and it's functioning and don't have to think about it anymore. No, it's just, yeah, it's there. That's when your technology's been successful. Like mobile phones and the ability for us to just have this conversation without even thinking twice about it.
Yes.
That's examples of great technology becoming just integrated into society.
So, what are some of the marketing strategies that you have, like, oh my gosh, this worked so well. This was beyond what I thought this could work. And what are some that you have found to be super successful that you can share with us? That may be a
Sure.
little surprising too.
Look, I guess one of the main things, the thing that keeps surprising me about how effective it is paid social, so paid advertising on social media. So, like for instance, I just gave you that example of the fact that we have just done this little tiny campaign over a couple of months, and it's pushed us to, between the competitors that we're tracking, it's pushed us to number one. And that video is a countdown, 3, 2, 1, and a vision of one of those NASA rockets launching, and then just follow us for spaceport updates. And like that has been so incredibly successful for us to generate. I think we've built our followers by 25% in 2 months, and when I started here, it was it was almost half that. So it's crazy to kind of think how successful it's been, and how I guess boosting posts and using, I guess, the algorithms within these social media platforms, and kind of understanding how they work is really important. So you can boost a post or sponsor a post, which is an organic post that sits on your feed. So then it's shown organically to your followers, but it's also perhaps you're saying to the platform, say LinkedIn, I'll just show this in America, or just show this in Asia, or whatever. It will show it in that region. You can show it to people who've only got space in their profiles, or some sort of space aspect or engineering. And it's just a matter of, then the algorithm goes away. You've put some spend behind it, so it's primed to then deliver it to those audiences. And it's amazing how much that helps you get in front of the right audiences. It's so much more effective than posting organically and just crossing your fingers and hoping that people will like your post or your content, and that it ends up in their feed. There's all these social platforms are businesses, so you've got to
Yes.
accept that you're going to have to put some money behind your campaigns to be able to achieve what you're trying to achieve.
And they're only going to reward you so much unless you have paid, because
Exactly.
that's their business model. And and it's they've you've got to pay to play. And the
Yep.
algorithms, I'd like to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole with algorithms.
Okay.
Just as this is one of the reasons why you need a marketing professional, is because you have these algorithms. It's like a secret recipe, and that nobody knows. Not
And
even the
they
people
change.
that work at the social marketing, social media places. They don't even know.
Yeah.
And so just as you think you got it figured out, and just as it's starting to work, they come up with an update that makes it to where it doesn't work anymore. So you actually need to have somebody that is constantly just paying attention and learning and trying new things. And it will come to a day where the things that worked yesterday don't necessarily work today. So, and that is also one of our challenges as marketing professionals, is that it's constantly moving. It's like
Yeah.
trying to shoot a bullseye at a moving target. It's just
Yeah.
constantly moving.
Yeah, exactly. You've said it perfectly, because it goes back to that measurement, to making sure that you're keeping on top of this as well. Because if suddenly your analytics have dropped off, you're thinking, oh, what's happened here? It could be because of that. It could be because of a heap of reasons. So having somebody as their job to be able to kind of go, okay, I'm on top of this. I understand that there's algorithms at play. I understand that there's competitors in the mix, and they might have. We haven't even talked about SEO yet, but they might have kind of perhaps they're doing a campaign around a particular keyword phrase or whatever. So there's a heap of different, I guess, levers that can
Yes.
affect how you're performing, and having somebody dedicated to that is really important for a company if you are really going to take this seriously.
And why do analytics change? And one of the reasons is because, there again, social media platforms are businesses. They have to make money, but they also have to make the user experience a good one. And one of the things that affects the analytics and makes these updates happen is the bad players that are in these particular platforms. The spammers, the predators, and those things. And that's why they're constantly changing, and what works today doesn't work tomorrow. Is and that's one of the reasons. I mean, I hate spammers. It's like
Yeah.
they wreck everything that's working. Um, so
Yeah,
that's just
yeah,
a
it
pet peeve
is.
of mine.
Well, I think it's important to make sure that we're always vigilant against that sort of thing. And that kind of leads into, having perhaps a customer relationship management tool like a CRM, and then, having a database that you communicate with. You need to make sure that you're aligned with privacy legislation. So like the GDPR in Europe, and the various privacy legislations that are around the world, because first of all, you don't want to break the law and you don't want to be fined.
Right.
But also, yeah, what we're doing is we're setting a standard for society to say this is where, we understand people don't want to get all this spam. They've got lives. They need to be able to, function. And my inbox is ridiculous sometimes, but,
Yes.
it's one of those things that as a society we're saying, this is where we draw the line, and this is where we want everybody to be, to be value adding to our audiences.
And that's another reason why you need somebody on staff to actually monitor and babysit these platforms, is because you do have bad actors that do start to do things with your audience. Like, for example, they may respond inappropriately to your posts, and you have to go through and you have to clean them up so that your audience,
Yes.
the real people, are not sitting there going, "Oh, I'm out of
Yes.
here."
Yep, I absolutely agree. In fact, the post that I just talked about with the video that we put some spam behind, it's amazing how quickly people jump onto that in the comment section, and they'll put something, click here for this particular service that they sell or whatever. And we're just, either deleting or hiding or whatever, those particular posts. But also, yeah, sometimes people just sometimes maybe they just don't have, they're trolls essentially. They don't have enough time, they have too much time on their hands. They don't have enough to do. And they seem to have kind of like, this hasn't particularly happened for ELA, but this has happened for previous employers, where it's just, they're just clearly out to just kind of have a platform to have a whinge on, and sometimes people get, kind of rude It's like,
Yes.
really, do you really want to say that online? So that actually leads to something else, which is on our platforms, we have our social media policy, so that we won't tolerate racism, we won't tolerate hate speech, we won't tolerate religious commentary, we won't tolerate political commentary. This is a platform for discussion about our product, your needs, that sort of thing. This is where our community is. So to be able to state that then gives you leverage later on when you want to go, no, I'm going to block that person because you've broken our policy. So be clearly stating that somewhere in your profile is really important too.
And sometimes it's hard to really distinguish between a troll and a fan that's just very concerned and is letting you know, because a lot of times they can sound almost similar. And, that again, it's
It's a bit of a
somebody that's
judgment.
familiar with that social policy. And when do you block them? Because
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
if you block somebody and they were within their rights, there's just that fine line.
Yeah, they
And
get
so,
grumpy.
yes,
Yeah, it is a really fine line, and it's about making sure that you have somebody checking these things daily, so that
yes,
but also on the flip side, when someone comments positively, you want it, they're
yes,
engaging with you, they're spending their time to part of their day, I'm sure they're really busy, to actually take the time to engage and say something on your post. It's kind of up to us then to go, thanks for that, even if it's just making sure everything gets liked, or
yes.
just saying, hey, thanks for the comment, or if it's a question, getting back to them. So we've got a 48-hour policy at the moment that just means that we can make sure that we can get to things over the weekends as well. But we tend to sort of reply as quickly as we can to any questions or comments, because yeah, we value these people. They're
Yes.
so valuable to our business, so we want to keep them. We want to make sure we're monitoring and managing, I guess, trolls or just people who are using our tools in ways that we don't want them to use them.
And sometimes when somebody's being negative and being grumpy and everything, everybody else is actually watching to see how we deal with it. So
Agreed.
how we deal with something that has gone wrong can reflect just as positively on us as somebody that's given a good comment, because the days are not always positive, but how do you deal with it? Do you just
Yeah.
sweep it under the carpet, or do you actually deal with it and talk about it and give people good perspective? So,
Yeah, I think so.
it's
It's important, because if you can take that person on a bit of a conversation through your comments to address what they've said, and there's a bit of to and fro. This happened particularly in a company that I last worked for, and then if you can get to the point where you've almost solved the problems, you've answered all the questions. That in itself is amazing marketing. That is,
yes.
as you say, people are watching this, and somebody else might have had that concern, but not, had enough, or not been interested enough, or not, what's the word, not been I guess maybe
Well, who
didn't
wants
have
to be a
enough.
target? Yeah, maybe
Exactly,
I
yeah.
was thinking about it, but I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want the backlash of some trolls. And so
Yes.
I just, but I valued what they were saying
Yeah,
in the
there's a lot
background.
of that. There's a lot of watching. Yeah,
Yes,
for every person who comments, there's hundreds just watching. So, there is value
absolutely.
in having that conversation publicly. I think maybe 10 years ago we said, oh, let's take this offline, and we'll deal with that customer or person or commenter, individually. I think now there is value to that. I think it's a case by case thing. You kind of, you need
Yes,
to make sure that, what is being said. If it's about your product, then answer the questions, and just kind of, sometimes people won't be, their opinions won't be changed, and that's okay. Everybody's entitled to that, and not everybody's our customer, and not everybody's our audience. So perhaps it's not right for that person.
exactly, exactly. So, okay, so the good stuff. Where do you see space happening in the next 10 to 20 years? Because most of what you're doing is in the future. It's
Yes.
planning for that next 10 years that happen, that next 20 years. So, where do you see everything going?
Yeah, I think the space sector, I think, obviously I'm in Australia. So I think what I'll see in the next 10 to 20 years, and what we'll see, is a real maturing of the Australian space sector. I think that will be industry led. And I think it's going to be on the back of what we have done in the last 10 to 15 years. So the investment in startups, the investment in, founder mentality that we've had here, and the encouragement and the seeding of the space sector here, coupled with an opportunity, because Australia's space sector is nowhere near as advanced or mature as the US space sector or European one. So I think what we're doing at the moment is we're growing founders, and we're growing people who have high tech backgrounds and those sorts of things. And then we're going, okay, we're pointing them at a sector that's just ripe for opportunity. And Australia will leverage its unique geography and its geopolitical stability, and there's a lot of value that, and we've got low population density here. We've got vast areas of Central Australia that have zero population. So, there's some uniqueness about Australia that I think we're actually going to start maturing in that time frame.
And just like what I was talking about, the resources and the what you have available to you, the fact that you have a lot of harsh landscape. Well, you know what? Mars and the moon are not exactly friendly. So
Exactly.
this is a beautiful test bed for some of these situations, and
it is,
to kind of determine, how you live in those harsh environments. And so
I think that leads into what I was going to say globally about the sector, which is that, look, just like my son is into motorsport, he loves it. And, I think about motorsport and I think about, well, there's things like traction control and disc brakes and ABS that were all developed in motorsport, in racing, that are now moved into just, cars generally for the safety of the general car driver, essentially, and passengers. And I think space offers that opportunity to us as well. So, if we can take space is harsh, those climates are harsh. If we can learn to live and I guess prosper and thrive in those environments, then the learnings that we'll take from that can then be fed back to people on Earth. Like I think in one of your recent podcasts, you were talking about learning how to wash with less water. How awesome would that be if we could bring that knowledge back to us, to Earth, and go, okay, well, you know what? We don't actually need to use all this water for washing now. Another great story. So, I think that's where we'll see the space sector to go generally going. Things like point-to-point travel, interplanetary exploration, absolutely. I mean, we're on that journey already. So I think we'll see advances in those areas too.
And when we go into those harsh environments and we physically are there, we learn a lot about the human body that we did not know before. We learn about our tolerances and our needs to be able to survive in those areas. That,
agreed. Yep.
With space, if it wasn't for space, we wouldn't even know, because space tends to accelerate some of those areas like aging and osteoporosis. They're doing a lot of studies in that because we lose bone density very quickly up there.
Yeah, agreed. And also, I think things like crops in space. So I think the Artemis 3 mission is looking at growing crops on the moon. I think I read something about that recently. And I think back to where I worked, 15 years ago, I remember the scientists at the research center saying, hey, you know what, we're going to have a population of like 9 billion by 2040. Not only do we have more mouths to feed, but we've got less land to grow crops on. And they were back then talking about, okay, well, what do we do? Do we things like grow crops on the sea, on the surface of the ocean? And how do we make them salt tolerant and able to resist abiotic stresses? But using space to grow crops, like how awesome is that? We can, all that land that we're currently devoting to that we could be using space for that. And then, there's more crops, there's more land. I think necessity drives innovation, and that's something that we're as a society going to have to deal with it, in the coming next decade and also.
So the last question I like to ask is, what thoughts do you want to leave your audience with today? What do you want them to think about as they go through their day going, okay, I actually never thought of that, and wow, this is pretty awesome.
Things like paid social media, obviously, definitely something that I think is worth investigating if you're not doing it already. If you're a space startup, have a look at that. Definitely building your own database is so important because third-party cookies are being phased out. So what we need to be doing is collecting first-party data. So if you put a subscribe function on your website and then hook that up to something that can collect that email information, you're building that database. And it's amazing how quickly it will start to build. And then you own that information. You own those email addresses. Those people have then taken that step to actually, to engage with you. So they're already past a qualifier. They're already interested in what you're doing or something that you're offering. So communicating with them should be relatively easy then. You want to make sure that you're not spamming and all of those sorts of things. But, I can't stress enough the value of building your own database and talking and speaking to them and value adding to them as well. I guess the other thing would be making sure that whether you go externally or internally with a marketing agency or a marketer managing your program, work with somebody who understands or can at least really quickly upskill to understand things like ITAR and, the Technology Safeguards Agreement and all of those sorts of things that I guess are little hurdles for companies that might not specialize in space. So look for a marketing agency that has sort of high-tech customers, other high-tech customers, or space customers. That would be fabulous too. Or if you're hiring somebody who has got some sort of tech background but can also do that marketing aspect as well.
Yeah, ITAR is regulations on who can work with certain companies and get grants. So definitely do look into ITAR, and I'm going to put a link to ITAR regulations, and that you can learn a little bit more about them, because you could actually put yourself out of the running for a particular grant or monies because you don't have the right people on staff. It can be something as simple as that, and or as complicated as, it is a complicated matter. So
yeah, it is.
I am not an ITAR expert, but
and neither am I. But I understand what it is, and I think that helps in conversations when we're talking about something. I'm like, well, we could communicate about that, but there's considerations that need to be given to various aspects, particularly if you're a space company dealing with any defense work as well. You want to make sure that you're dotting your I's and you're crossing your T's, because as you say, you can spend all these resources going down a path and then realize, whoops, we actually don't qualify.
Yes. And for something simple, that you could have changed a year ago. And so definitely do be aware of it so that you can abide by those regulations. So wonderful. Thank you so much for meeting with us today. And we look forward to seeing what ELA does.
My pleasure, Izzy. It's been fabulous. I love talking about marketing. So, I could have gone for another hour.
A special thanks to Amanda Hudswell, Head of Marketing Communications and Public Affairs at Equatorial Launch Australia, for sharing her journey to space. Be sure to check out her links listed in today's show notes. Please like and subscribe to the Space Marketing Podcast to help get the word out about this incredible industry of space. I hope that you have found this podcast useful for your journey as you reach for the stars.